Hey, Gobi here with a guide on our newest 5-star Hanya. Wait, she's a 4-star? Oh, well, she's an honorary 5-star with those animations and kit, and when used right, she is honestly insane. And I'll show you exactly how, exactly why in this video. I'll go through her kit and how it actually works because it's quite a wordy one, then her Eidolons to see how many copies you should go for. I'll finish with her best relics, light cones, energy rotations to maximize her ultimate, and then pros and cons and synergies. If you like this guide, let me know below with a like and maybe a sub, and let me know below if you're pulling for Hanya, and let's begin. Hanya is a 4-star physical harmony unit, our first of this combo. At level 80, she has a base HP of 917, a base attack of 564, and a base defense of 352. Very squishy. She has a very high base speed of 110, and with her speed traces, has the highest starting speed before gear in the game. Finally, her energy cost is a high 140, but we have our friend Koggers to help. So onto her kit. Hanya's basic is basic, but her skill, Samsara Locked, is a very potent ability. She first deals some damage to one enemy, okay, and then applies burden to said enemy. Then for every 2 basic attacks, skills, or ultimates on this enemy, so unfortunately not talent-based follow-ups for example, allies will recover 1 skill point. Her skill will in fact count as a trigger for this 4 attack condition, so you only need 3 after using this skill. She can trigger this twice, but reusing her skill before triggering it twice will mess it up if used on the same target, and refresh it completely if used on another, losing your potential skill point and making you skill point neutral. When you use skill to proc the 4th part of her skill point generation, she will reapply burden but consume a charge, losing a possible skill point again. So in both cases it makes her skill point neutral, which is a bit of a waste. It does mean if you want to skill spam that you'd want 3 ways of dealing basic, skill, or ultimate damage before Hanya gets her next turn, which isn't always possible, especially since Hanya is going to be very fast. Meaning she will be rotating her skill and basic attack a lot of the time, so she can't skill every turn like some people think, but that's okay. So this skill is pretty much like a basic attack worth of skill points, whilst providing more energy to Hanya than her basic, and also providing buffs for allies as we will see with her talent. She uses 1 skill point to activate the skill and gains 2 back. Since she will usually cycle skill into basic, she'll be generating 1 skill point per turn pretty much. But if you can skill spam with 3 ally procs every Hanya turn, you're also generating 1 skill point per turn. As a final benefit, Hanya can also prevent skill point overflow with this skill. At 5 skill points, which can happen sometimes, she can use that skill point while still providing her talent's benefits and letting the DPS regain the skill point just afterwards. So to explain her talent, Sanction, will make it so whenever an ally uses a basic attack, skill, or ultimate on an enemy affected with her skill's mark Burden, they will gain a 2 turn damage percent buff, which is kind of insane. And no, it's not a vulnerability debuff. And it's not only 2 turns, it's 3 since this buff won't tick down on the turn you gain it. And you gain it before you even do your attack. So it's pretty much a permanent 30% damage buff to your DPS, and maybe another possible DPS in a dual DPS team. She does this whilst generating skill points, and we haven't even got to the ultimate yet. This also means if you use an AoE skill and it hits the burden mark, well, that whole attack still will get buffed. Her ultimate, 10 Lords Decree, All Shall Obey, will increase the target ally's speed by a percentage of her own, and increase that ally's attack by a fixed amount depending on the level, 60% at level 10. This has a cost of 140, and we will see the best ways to reach this ultimate in a bit. Now some guides might not explain this, but this 2-turn ult duration is deceptive. This ultimate will not tick down on the first turn if it's applied during an ally turn. This means this ult is effectively 3 turns long, which is massive. Hanya will be built to be super fast, so her ult will be able to be saved for the ally turn just after. Hanya on a 3-turn ultimate thus allows for an infinite speed and attack buff on her ally, and we'll see how to do a 3-turn rotation in the rotation section. As for the speed buff, it is a snapshot of her speed when she casts it, so any speed buffs applied to her also increase the speed buff she gives. This works for example with the Hacker Space 4-piece, which will give her speed before she grants her speed buff. Finally, Hanya's technique will attack the enemy and apply burden to a random enemy. This won't trigger a count unlike the skill though because it isn't a basic skill or ultimate. Now onto her traces, one which is awesome. Her first Ascension passive grants allies that proc the skill point recovery a 10% attack bonus for 1 turn. This applies after their turn though, and ideally the DPS triggers the recovery, so it's a bit weird to use. A second passive is major though. If the skill point recovery trigger amount is at 1 or lower, meaning you've recovered 1 skill point from her skill or none at all, and then the enemy dies, you'll gain a skill point. This means no matter what happens with the enemy you apply your burden onto, you'll always be gaining at least 1 skill point from them, and at best 2. Her final passive will grant her 2 energy whenever her skill point recovery is triggered, for a possible total of 4 bonus energy per skill usage. This, as usual with Harmony energy traces, is absolutely needed for her rotations. Her trace bonuses grant her 9 speed, putting her speed pre-gear at 119, but this doesn't count as base speed. She'll also gain 28% attack, which is whatever, and a much needed 10% HP for her tankiness. Now let's review those Eidolons to see how many copies you actually might want to go for. Her E1 grants her a 15% advance forward when an ally with her ult buffs gets a kill, once per turn. This is an okay starter, it just means she can generate more skill points if you get enough kills over the duration of a fight. Her E2 is a banger though, granting her 20% speed after using her skill. As we now know, the ultimate will snapshot her speed, so this is a direct 22 speed buff to herself after using her skill, and a 4.4 speed buff to her ultimate. It also won't tick down on the turn you used your skill on, meaning if you ult after the skill or ult the turn after, that speed buff will be improving your ultimate. E4 is an amazing boost to autoplay, considering they won't ult on ally turns and just ult whenever. It is also a boost to her infinite ult power in manual play. If you don't want to run the 3-turn rotation and prefer running a buffing light cone like Planetary Rendezvous, but still want that infinite ult, this E4 allows for an effective 4 turns of ultimate buff duration. E5 is a direct buff to her ult and talent, both of her buffing abilities. Finally, E6 increases Burden's damage percent bonus by 10%, for a final great boost to Hanya's buffing power. Now let's move on to relics. Hanya doesn't need any stat apart from speed, and of course some tankiness so she doesn't get one-shot. Her other stats won't improve her buffing power, so you can pretty much go whatever build you want provided you hit high speed and make sure she doesn't die. For a super standard support build, just run full Hackerspace. The speed buff will boost Hanya's ult's own speed buff, allowing your DPS to go super fast on one turn and very fast on the following turns. It will also grant her a nice permanent speed increase to hit those high thresholds she will be building for. 2 hacker and a 2 defensive relic set works fine too. There's also the option of going break effect, a bit like Asta can go break effect due to her high toughness damage. Hanya kinda can, but with slightly weaker toughness damage. She will hit for 60 to 30 per turn, but if she can get a break off with her high attack and frequency, then physical break can definitely help out damage wise. You of course would have to play around it, and it's just an option. For planar ornaments, you want to go Broken Kill, Fleet of the Ageless, Vonowak, or Penacony. Broken Kill for high F-res builds and team crit damage. Fleet for dot teams. Vonowak if you want to tune your first move for a speedy ultimate for your DPS, and Penacony alongside a physical DPS. She can use the 5% energy from Vonowak or Penacony in some rotations, so it's possible to use outside these conditions. The main stats go for a tank stat chest, speed boots always, tank stat orb, and an energy rope. If you don't run an energy rope, you'll need cogs or memories of the past. This means for break build, you can technically go break rope and memories for already over 100 break effect without compromising her energy gains. For an idle stat goal, you want 3.5k HP, 1.2k defense, and 161 speed. I've gone for a tankier stat line than usual since MOC 12 is coming. Speed is really dependent on what you want since her buff scales on her speed, but I found 161 to be a great start alongside a 134 speed DPS. With speed boots, Hackerspace 2-piece, and her tracers alone, she reaches 150 speed easily. Onto Lycans, she has many options since Harmony is just so cool like that. But the battle isn't over is an option, since when your ally is fast from your ultimate, they can be tuned easily behind Hanya. The only problem is in some cases they'll be too fast for Hanya, since the speed buff can make them go ahead of Hanya, and so that damage percent buff won't come into play. The energy of this light cone is worse than meshing cogs 2, and the skill point is whatever when she's already generating a turn. Dance 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 is great on auto perhaps, but if you're trying to infinitely buff your DPS, they won't gain the action advance, and you might end up being too fast for your DPS and having to stall out your ultimate too much, which can ruin your rotation without the 2 energy procs from her A6. Planetary Rendezvous is amazing with the physical DPS of course, and Carve the Moon works I guess if you ended up getting it. Her best otherwise would be Memories of the Past or Meshing Cogs. They both provide the same energy benefits she needs for a 3-turn rotation over her normal 4-turn rotation, as we will see in a bit. Memories of the Past, like I said, could be nice for that break build. So let's discuss rotations, very important for Harmony units. If you're going for no energy gains, she'll end up having a 5-turn rotation, but that's not what we want. Meshing Cogs alone, or Memories of the Past at S4 or higher, can enable a 4-turn rotation very easily. This can be skill basic rotation or skill spam. If you don't want to run Meshing Cogs, you can replace it with an energy rope on a 5% energy planar set for the same energy gains and a 4-turn rotation. These 4-turn rotations can be used at E0, and at E4 they are amazing. For 3-turn rotations, which allows for that infinite ult power pre-E4, you have two options. The first is the skill basic rotation with energy rope, 5% energy planar set, and Meshing Cogs. The only problem is if you want to continue that rotation, you'll mess up on the second rotation out of 2. This can be solved through external energy, or if you just spam repeat the initial rotation of skill basic skill. The other 3-turn rotation is through skill spamming with energy rope and Meshing Cogs. As we saw earlier, this is hard to do. She is super fast, and 3 ally damaging basics, skills, or ultimates won't be happening every single turn of Hanya's. So let's discuss pros and cons. Her first pro is that skill point generation. She provides the same skill point generation as Pela, can be run much faster, and does tons of different buffs whilst doing so. Her second is her versatility. Attack percent, damage percent, speed, more attack percent, all on a hyper carry or potentially on a dual DPS setup. She is very versatile. Another pro is her obvious Harmony path, meaning she can hold buffing Lycones for even more power. And then she has a very great starting speed and doesn't need other stats to scale, meaning she can all in on speed and thus generate more skill points for the squad. Finally, I think she's insane at E0. Her add-ons do improve her nicely in some cases, but I don't see any problems with sticking to E0. For cons, I'd say it's the wonky skill point generation. Even if it is amazing, the fact that her own skill can't be used to complete the second skill point generation and then refresh it is a bit annoying, but definitely there to balance her out, and I hope that wasn't a bug on my part again. Another con is her restrictive energy. Her rotations are quite tight, and so missing those 2 energy procs from her skill point generation can ruin your rotation if you don't have external energy. Now to finish with synergies. Any skill point intensive team or DPS can use Hanya very effectively. She is just that good. Any dual DPS team can also use her effectively, and they are usually skill point intensive too. And really, any DPS can use her really well if they want, except for Blade in a solo team where the attack percent is a bit useless, but the other buffs are great. So let's look at some examples of teams. We have the Clara Topaz dual DPS team. Instead of Asta buffing both Clara and Topaz's speed, now Hanya can buff the speed of Topaz alone and increase the damage of both DPS by much more. Hanya with a Planetary Rendezvous and or Penacony on top means Clara gets a chunky damage increase. The extra skill points over Asta means more skill points used from one of the DPS too. Jingliu Blade dual DPS team can use Hanya amazingly. If you don't have Bronya, Hanya can use her ult on Jingliu, allowing for a very fast Jingliu that can easily enter her spectral state, and her talent will buff Blade and Jingliu very well. In this team, even with Bronya, you eventually run into some skill point issues, so Hanya can allow both DPS to get their damage out. Jing Yuan can use Hanya to buff his speed and allow for 2 turns before Lightning Lord. My Silver showed that he needed a certain speed, but this was before I knew what Hanya was capable of. So if you do the 3-turn ult or have E4, you can infinitely buff Jing Yuan's speed whilst being skill point positive, meaning he only needs about 109 speed if running with a 161 speed Hanya. Argenti is also being released with Hanya, and you should check out my guide on him. She can boost him just like any other DPS, there's no particular synergy, but that speed is also nice for him going attack percent boots for big ultimate nukes. The Penacony Rendezvous combo is a good bonus. I think Hanya is just amazing and is definitely going to be underrated if people don't discover these techs with her. So let me know if you're pulling for her. Thanks to all my amazing members, thanks for watching and have a go day.